on to the double stops of the second movement of the Schumann concerto, there's a question about how to practice them well. And so I saw in your video that you're practicing very slowly. Or I think sometimes you're going to the D and G strings here. And that was one of the questions. So first of all, you do have the option to go down the A string. Then you go... And although it's further away for the hand, it makes it easier for the bow to maintain the legato. So, but it also depends what color you're looking for. If you want a darker color, then of course this is nice. So, and then there's the question how to connect. So my counter question to that is, do you need to connect those two phrases? So if you look at the harmonies, you've got this phrase, cadence, lots of wolves, new cadence. To me, it is not necessary to connect those two pieces of the phrase. The accompaniment is continuous. It does that for you. I think you can make an articulation break at least. It doesn't have to be a phrase break, but at least if you're doing it here. Oh. Sorry, I haven't practiced this in a while. Okay, so what you can do if you want that to be a continuous phrase, but you don't necessarily want to connect the articulation, is leave this double stop open. Okay, as if you're, well, just without changing the dynamic, without making it louder, without making it softer, just leaving open like ah. And then you go on in your practice, very calmly, slowly. Okay, so if you were to stop it under the bow, then you would really hear it as a stop. But if you leave it open, then you can start to close the gap in time between here and here without, and it will still be a little bit of a break, but the listener will probably not perceive it as a break if you leave that double stop kind of lying open. So then the other thing that I would recommend is really listen to the glissandi in between each double stop. Okay, make it messy so you really hear it. And if you're going to go down the A string, and then especially think about whether this is connected between the second phrase and the third phrase, where in the accompaniment it goes to D dominant seventh. Do you really want that to be connected to? I personally don't think of that as a connection. I think of it as a new iteration. So think about that, whether you really need that connection. And then the last connection would be... Right? And you can do that here, or you can do it here. I find it, for many reasons, also technical, nicer on the A string, A and D strings. Okay, so then about the bow, the role of the bow in the double stops, going between A and D strings and D and G strings. Let's say you're doing this bowing. just take this, think about it, think about how much you can do just with your imagination. So I'm focusing on the upper line. I'm just thinking. That's relatively easy to connect. So if you focus on that when you're practicing, you can cheat a little bit, right? So that you get to the B flat before you get to the D. And then you can, again, that's just for your practicing. And then you can close that gap of getting almost both fingers there at the same time. But for me, the main thing is the concentration on the top line, which is the glue that connects. It's the melody, so it connects the phrase. And then one more thing that I observe in your video is that you're letting the bow a little bit fall a little bit passively from the upper strings to the lower strings. And what I mean by that is that the hand is just holding the bow very lightly and your arm is falling. And in some cases that would be great. Like if you're doing anything like bariolage in Baroque music, then that's absolutely the way to go, I think, right? In this case, I think the hand needs to be more active, not so passive. So really an extension of the arm. So, and because they're double stops, you need a little bit more bite at the beginning and ending of. So I am using my first finger a little bit just to make sure that both strings speak at the same time. So it looks in slow motion, it would be like, well, you can watch the video in slow motion, but I would lower with my arm and always keep the wrist at the same angle, and then dig in just a little bit with the fingers. Okay? So I hope that helps with the double stops. And let's move on a little bit to some other questions. There's a fingering that I wanted to talk about in bar 310. And yes, I did that already. Okay, so moving on to the third movement.